Hi there, this is Stories for Sleep, and I'm Thumani's here to spend a quiet evening with you. A space where nothing needs to get done, where you can let the day go gently. Right now, just lie down as comfortably as you can. Let your hands rest beside you or gently over your belly. No need to adjust anything, just be. Take a slow breath in, hold it softly, then exhale easy and quiet. One more time. Inhale deeply. Feel the air cooling your chest and exhale like you're letting the day slip away. Now bring your attention to your forehead. If you're holding tension, let it go. Let your brow soften. Move down to your shoulders. Feel them sinking into the mattress. Relax your arms, hands, and fingertips. Let them feel light, like they're floating in warm water. Notice your chest and belly gently rising and falling, like a quiet boat rocking on still water. And now, know that there's nothing more you have to do. No one needs you to respond. No one is waiting. This moment is just for you and for a story told softly to help you rest. Whenever you're ready, we'll begin. Hey guys, tonight we're going to lose something. Not your keys, not your phone, something even more annoying. Your sense of control. Picture this, you're walking down a mountain trail. The sky is turning peach orange. Your feet are dusty, your robe sticks to your back, and in your pocket is a small cloth pouch. A handful of coins wrapped in cotton. It's not much, but it's all you have. Maybe enough for a hot bun and a night in a straw hut if you're lucky. And then, poof, the pouch is gone. You sure you can sleep tonight? Because honestly, if I were you, I'd be spiraling so hard, I'd start composing apology letters to my bank account. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment below where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing your sleepy little corner of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The monk's name was Ryosin. He was young, full of questions, and secretly obsessed with the idea of doing things right. Not perfectly, just right. Right posture, right breath, right amount of rice in the bowl. That afternoon, he had been sent down the mountain by his teacher to pick up some medicinal herbs. His sandals were worn, his back ached, but his spirit was light. The vendor in town had given him a small discount. Said his shaved head made him look trustworthy. With a quiet grin, Ryosin folded the coins into a cloth, tucked them into his robe, and began the trek back up. The trail was rocky. The wind was playful. A few crows heckled him from the trees. By the time the sun dipped below the hills, his thoughts had already wandered. He imagined presenting the herbs to his teacher and receiving a gentle nod. Maybe, just maybe, he'd earn a full sentence of praise. Maybe even half a smile. But halfway up the path, Ryosin stopped. His hand went to his robe. His fingers reached into the fold. Nothing. The cloth pouch gone. He checked again. Nothing. He checked again. Still nothing. spilling over a low table, it soaked into everything. He turned around, scanned the dirt trail, looked under a bush, retraced his steps, asked a squirrel. The squirrel was busy chewing on something that looked suspiciously like string, but the pouch had vanished. The money, the effort, the approval he hoped to gain, gone. By the time Ryosin reached the monastery gate, his head was bowed like a willow tree in wind. He didn't knock. He just stood there, still, shivering more from shame than cold. The old wooden door creaked open. His teacher, the master, appeared calm as a pond, a simple candle in hand. "You're late?" the master said, not unkindly. Ryosin said nothing. "Where is the medicine?" Ryosin looked down. I lost the money." Silence. No scolding, no sigh. Just the candle flickering in the breeze between them. Then the master asked softly, "Where is the loss?" Ryosin blinked. "What? Where is the loss?" The master repeated and then turned, walking back inside, leaving the door open behind him. Ryosin stood there for a moment, confused and slightly offended. "Where is the loss?" The loss is where the coins fell into a squirrel's house," he thought. "The loss is in my stomach, already dreading being hungry tomorrow. The loss is right here, burning in my chest like shame wearing shoes." But he followed the master inside anyway. His sleeping mat felt colder than usual. His thoughts were louder, racing, arguing, replaying. That question wouldn't leave him alone. Where is the loss? He imagined himself answering it in 100 ways, each more clever than the last. But none seemed to satisfy that deep itch inside his chest. The one that throbbed beneath his ribs and whispered, "You failed. You're less now than before." And still the master hadn't said a word of blame. Ryosin lay in the darkness. The wind tapped gently on the paper walls. Somewhere someone sneezed. A dog barked once and went quiet again. He closed his eyes, and to his own surprise, he slept. Not a shallow, twitchy, shame-filled nap, but a warm, deep, full-bodied sleep. Like someone had picked up his spine and wrung the tension out of it. Like nothing was missing after all. In the morning, when Ryosin woke, the world hadn't ended. The sun rose like it always did, shameless and gold. The birds argued over breakfast. The master sat sipping tea. Ryosin bowed in greeting. The master nodded. No mention of the money, no punishment, no frown. Just a glance toward the forest. "I wonder what the forest did with your coins," he said. Ryosin laughed for the first time in hours. Maybe it bought a new tree. Maybe it gave a beetle a promotion. Maybe he thought it paid for a lesson I didn't know I was supposed to learn. He sat beside the master and poured himself tea. The tea was bitter and perfect. Next time we follow Ryosin into the rain, where an empty bowl leads to an unexpected guest with no eyebrows. A strange riddle and a story about grief that somehow soothes your soul. But for now, let that question echo gently in your breath. Where is is the loss? Let it float there. Don't answer it. Just rest with it and sleep. The question didn't go away. It sat with you like a cat that had chosen your lap not because you called it, but because it wanted to sit there. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at you. Where is the loss? You woke slowly that morning. The cold stone floor pressed through your mat. The smell of old cedar lingered in the air. Outside, crows resumed their usual bickering. One sounded oddly like it was laughing at you. You stretched, unsure whether you were sore from the walk or from sleeping on a question all night. In the courtyard, the master was sweeping fallen leaves with a broom made of twigs. That thing had zero efficiency. You thought, surely we could use a real broom, but of course, this was Zen. If something made too much sense, it was probably suspicious. You approached him slowly, clutching the same silence that had slept beside you. He didn't look up. "You've returned," he said, his voice calm, like water poured slowly into a bowl. "I have." And you hesitated. "I don't know where the loss is." The master stopped sweeping. Then he looked up finally and pointed to your chest. "It's not there," he said, and walked away, dragging the twig broom like a monk with attitude. You stood there for a while, listening. The wind carried the sound of water from somewhere. A distant stream? Or was that just the wind brushing against the walls of your thoughts? You didn't know, so you went to find it. Later that morning, you took your begging bowl and walked down the hill again. Not because you wanted to, because it was practice. You walked barefoot this time. To stay grounded, the master said. Honestly, it just made you hungry faster. You stopped by a shrine where old women placed oranges. You bowed as always, then waited nearby holding the bowl in both hands, trying to look serene, not desperate. A fine line. One woman gave you half a rice cake. Another offered you a suspiciously old pickle. And one just patted your head and whispered, "You're too pretty to be a monk." You laughed awkwardly. Still, you weren't collecting much. By midday, the bowl was nearly empty. Your stomach was not. Then the rain started. Soft at first, like polite applause. Then louder, less polite. You took shelter under the eaves of a shuttered tea shop. Watched the road blur. Listened to the rain smacking the earth like nature had something to prove. That's when you saw him. He shuffled up the road with no umbrella, no hat, and no eyebrows. A man in layers of mismatched cloth, his feet wrapped in burlap. His gait was uneven, but determined. He walked like someone who'd made peace with wetness. He saw you, tilted his head, and smiled. "Monk," he said, "you're losing something." You looked down thinking maybe you dropped your bowl this time. But no. Still there. Still empty-ish. "What do you mean?" you asked. "The rain. You're losing heat through your scalp. It's a terrible design flaw." You blinked. He reached into his robe and pulled out something wrapped in wax paper. He unwrapped it slowly, deliberately. Inside was a ball of steamed barley. "Trade you this?" he said for a question. You raised an eyebrow. "Is it a riddle?" "No." Just a question. I ask. You answer. Then we eat. You were hungry. You were also wet. This felt fair. Deal. The man sat beside you under the eaves and held the barley ball like a holy relic. Then he asked, "If you pour a spoonful of salt into a glass of water, is it still drinkable?" You nodded. No, it'd be too salty. Good, he said, nodding. Now, what if you pour the same spoon of salt into a lake? You smiled. Of course, the lake absorbs it. You don't taste the salt. The man nodded again. And now he said, tearing the barley ball in half and handing you your share, "Which one is your mind?" You chewed quietly. The barley was plain, a little sweet. Steam rose from it like the last breath of a warm thought. Outside, the rain softened again. "Your mind," he said between bites, "is the container. Your troubles, the salt." You swallowed. "So, I should become more like a lake." He chuckled. "No, that's the second mistake. Second, the first mistake is thinking there's any salt at all." You stared at him. "My pouch of coins," you began. He shook his head. "Salt. My worry about failing the task. Salt. My fear of disappointing my teacher. Salt." You sat back, blinking at the grey sky. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of earth and steam. You looked down at your empty bowl. It no longer felt empty. He stood up slowly, as if his bones remembered every storm he'd ever walked through. "Thank you," you said. He nodded, already turning. Before you could ask his name, he waved a hand and said, "Don't follow me. I'm going somewhere I haven't been yet." And just like that, he disappeared into the trees. You returned to the temple late that afternoon, bowl in hand, heart a little more spacious. The master was sipping tea. He looked up. "Did you find what you were missing?" he asked. You looked at the bowl, then your hands, then his eyes. "No," you said. "But I think I found the thing that was looking for me." The master smiled. That half smile, the one you'd hoped for since yesterday. He pointed to your chest again. "Still not there," he said, and walked away. Sometimes a lesson isn't delivered in a temple or a book. Sometimes it comes wrapped in wax paper, handed over by a man with no eyebrows and a handful of steam. But you'll only recognize it if your mind has enough room. So tonight, ask yourself quietly, without expectation, what is the size of your container? And let the question settle in. No answers needed. Just rain and rest. Next time, a story about sleeping under thunderclouds and why the master compared your brain to a boiling pot, left on high heat because apparently he thinks your worry is just a badly managed kitchen. But for now, just be a lake. Still, wide, soft, sleep well. The funny thing about emptiness is it's surprisingly heavy. You would think that carrying nothing would be the easiest burden of all. But that night, as you lay down on your mat with an empty belly, empty bowl, and not a single coin to your name, the weight of nothing pressed down like a thick wool blanket. And yet, something else was happening too. weren't spiraling. You weren't counting regrets like sheep. You weren't playing the what-if game on repeat like a broken cassette. You were breathing slowly, deeply, almost like your body had figured something out before your mind did. The room was quiet. No candle tonight, just moonlight. Soft silver streaks poured through the paper wall, tracing lines across the wooden floor. Your teacher had said nothing since you returned. Not a single question, not a parable, not even one of those dramatic pauses he liked to throw in mid-sentence like he was auditioning for a Zen drama. Just a glance, a faint nod, and then he disappeared behind the beaded curtain of his quarters. You lay on your side. The straw mat crinkled beneath you, and for the first time in days you noticed there were no thoughts screaming inside your skull. Just space. Spacious like a temple before sunrise, you let out a soft sigh, not because you needed to, just because it felt good, and then you slept. When you woke, it was still dark, not night dark, but that soft, sacred darkness that comes right before the sky starts to bleed light. You sat up. You didn't feel rested. You felt reset, like your bones had been rearranged just slightly, like a tight knot inside your chest had finally loosened, like your mind had gone to a spa and someone gave it cucumber slices and chamomile tea. And the strangest part, you hadn't eaten. You hadn't solved anything. You hadn't even figured out the meaning behind the question. Where is the loss? But somehow, you had let go. Not in a dramatic I am now enlightened way. More like the way a hand slowly releases a cup it forgot it was holding. Outside, the world was still sleeping. The clouds hung low and heavy. Somewhere in the distance, thunder grumbled like an old man being woken up too early. You stepped into the courtyard. The earth was damp. Leaves clung to your sandals. The smell of wet pine drifted in the air like an old memory. You saw the master standing by the garden. He was staring at a single daikon radish growing crooked near the edge of the path. You stood beside him. He didn't look at you. You slept well, he said. You nodded. He finally turned eyes soft. Strange, isn't it, how the less you carry, the more you rest. You smiled. I had nothing left to hold on to. That's why your fingers finally relaxed, he said, tapping your hand gently with one finger. Then he walked away, calling over his shoulders, "Bring your bowl." The rain's coming again. You followed him, bowl in hand, heart oddly light. The master led you to the side of the mountain, where water dripped from mossy stones into a bamboo pipe. He pointed. "Hold your bowl there." You obeyed. The water was cold, crystal clear. It filled your bowl slowly, drop by drop. No rush, no pressure. "Now drink," he said. You did. It tasted like clean, like honesty, like the absence of everything extra. The master sat on a nearby rock, cross-legged, watching the fog roll in. "Most people try to sleep by silencing the noise," he said. "But the noise isn't the problem." You raised an eyebrow. "Then what is?" He smiled that half smile again. The kind that's either profound or mildly sarcastic, you couldn't always tell. "The grasping," he said. You can sleep through thunder, but not through grasping. You thought about the night before, the way your body had unclenched, the way your mind had, just for a few hours, stopped chasing solutions. I didn't let go on purpose, you admitted. Of course not, he said. No one ever does. The fog thickened. Birds chirped somewhere deep inside it like lost messages from another world. You looked down at your bowl. Empty again, but somehow this time it felt complete. The master stood and stretched like a cat. Then he picked up a small rock and handed it to you. Here, he said, carry this today. You held it. It wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light either. What's it for nothing, he said, and walked off. You stared at the stone. It was smooth, cool to the touch, just there. No meaning, no instruction, no riddle, just a rock. And yet, as you walked back toward the main hall, it sat in your palm like a quiet friend. Maybe some things don't need to be explained. Maybe some things are just meant to be held for a while, then set down. That night, as the rain drummed softly on the roof, you slipped into sleep without ceremony. You didn't count breaths. You didn't rehearse forgiveness. You didn't chase enlightenment like a dog chasing its own tail. You just let the darkness hold you. And somewhere deep in the silence, a whisper passed through, you've lost nothing worth losing. Next time you'll meet a man who talks to salt and you'll realize your worry is just steam rising from a pot you forgot was boiling. But for now, close your eyes. Let the rock in your hand grow lighter. Let your breath spread across your chest like warm tea. You are empty, which means you are ready. Sleep, dear one. The bowl was empty again. It had become a familiar feeling, this weightless, echoing kind of emptiness. Not hunger exactly, not poverty, just openness. You carried it in your hands like something sacred. Even though to anyone passing by, it probably just looked like a wooden bowl being juggled by a very damp monk. Rain had started up again, this time heavier. It drummed across your shoulders, slid down your back and filled your sleeves like someone had poured tea down your arms. You were halfway down the village slope when a wheelbarrow passed you wobbling through puddles. The man pushing it had a wide straw hat, and no expression whatsoever like the rain didn't apply to him. You offered a bow. He nodded back, but said nothing. A dog barked in the distance, then immediately regretted it and took cover under a cart. And there you were, standing alone in the rain, with your empty bowl. And for some strange reason, you weren't miserable. The master had sent you out again that morning with only 3 words. Don't try today. You blinked. Don't try. He looked up from his tea. Just walk and hold your bowl. So that's what you were doing. Not begging, not hoping, not visualizing abundance like a motivational scroll. Just walking. Just holding the bowl. And it was oddly freeing until it started to collect water. At first, you tilted it slightly, trying to keep the rain out. Then you remembered the master's words. Don't try. So you didn't. You let the bowl fill. Drop by drop it caught the sky. A child passed you, holding an umbrella shaped like a frog. She looked at you, then looked at your bowl and whispered something to her mom. Her mom gave you an apologetic smile. You smiled back, rain dripping from your chin. You continued walking, bowl slowly, filling your robe clinging tighter to your frame like an over-attached friend. At the edge of the village, where the rice fields stretched into mist, you found a small thatched hut. It looked abandoned or maybe just shy. You stepped under the eaves and stood still. The bowl now had maybe an inch of water. Clear, cold. You watched the ripples form with each drop. And that's when he appeared again. The old man. No eyebrows. Same layers of cloth, same half smile that made you question your grasp on reality. He didn't say hello, just looked at your bowl and said, "I see the sky has been generous." You nodded. It's not rice, but it's something. He sat down beside you, legs creaking like the floor of a very old inn. Then he said, "Tell me, if you were thirsty, would you drink that?" You looked into the bowl. There was a leaf in it now, possibly a bug. Definitely some sky. Maybe you said, "If I was very thirsty." He nodded. Rainwater is honest. You looked sideways at him. What does that mean? It means it never pretends to be more than it is. It comes. It falls. It leaves. It doesn't explain itself. Doesn't ask for thanks. You smiled. Like a Zen master. He laughed. Zen masters wish they were that humble. You both sat in silence listening to the rain slide off the roof. It was a sound that filled the spaces between your thoughts. A sound with no ambition. Then he asked, "What do you think your bowl is for?" You opened your mouth, but he stopped you. No clever answers, just say the first thing that comes. You paused. Receiving? He nodded. Good. And if it's already full, then it can't receive. Even if it's just full of rain. You looked down. The bowl was almost brimming. No, you said quietly. It can't receive anything else. He leaned in slightly. Then why do you cling to what fills your mind, even when it's just the weather? You blinked. Your thoughts had been filled with worry. About money, about failure, about approval. And now filled with rain. Still full, still unable to receive. You reached out and gently tipped the bowl. The water spilled onto the ground with a soft splash. The old man smiled. Now you're ready for real food. He pulled something from his sleeve. A strange knotted cloth bundle. You raised an eyebrow. Another barley ball. No, he said. This one's special. It's been sitting near my heater for 3 days. That doesn't make it more appetizing. He unwrapped it. Inside was a small dumpling. Misshapen. Possibly fermented. Definitely suspicious. Try it, he said. You did. It was surprisingly good. Savory, warming, comforting. comforting, like something your grandmother would have made if she were a Zen hermit with zero regard for modern hygiene. After the meal, you both sat quietly again. Then he stood up and said, "Your bowl is clean now." You looked down, empty again. But no bugs, no leaves, no sky, just space. "Thank you," you said. He smiled. "Don't thank me, thank the rain." And with that, he stepped out into it. The sky swallowed him. You returned to the temple as the clouds parted. The sun spilled through shy and golden. The master stood near the garden, watering a row of plants with a hollowed-out gourd. He looked up and said, "You are soaked." You nodded. He looked at your bowl, empty again. You nodded. He smiled. "Good." Then he turned and said over his shoulder, "Come tomorrow with the same bowl, but bring no expectations. That's the only way to receive anything worth keeping." That night you placed your dry bowl beside your mat, and somehow its emptiness felt like companionship. You fell asleep easily, not because your problems were solved, but because you finally stopped trying to solve them. Next time the old man returns with a story about a war, a lost family, and the only thing he still owns, peace. But for now, listen to the silence, the rain left behind. Let your bowl stay empty, and let your breath rise and fall inside it. Sleep peacefully. The man with no eyebrows came again, this time without warning. You were sitting beneath the twisted pine near the lower pond, your bowl resting on your knees, your breath slow and even. The clouds were playing their usual game, drifting, gathering, drifting again. Nothing urgent, nothing forced. That morning the master had said only this: "Don't speak today unless someone asks you a real question." You had nodded like you understood. You did not understand. So you sat there, quiet, open, like a screen door waiting for wind. And then, like a haiku come to life, the old man appeared barefoot, humming something that sounded like a lullaby, sung by someone who forgot the words. He stopped in front of you, peered down, and said, "You look like someone pretending not to think." You smiled. "And you look like someone who lost his eyebrows to a kitchen fire." He laughed. "Close. A meditation fire. You'd be surprised how flammable stillness can be." You raised your eyebrows, still intact, and gestured to the space beside you. He sat down with a grunt, bones creaking like an old temple gate. "You hungry?" he asked. You shook your head. "Liar," he said, pulling out a small rice bundle wrapped in cloth. "Eat anyway?" You didn't argue. That was part of your unspoken agreement by now. So you ate. In silence. Rain had softened the air. Your breath felt heavier in your chest, but in a good way. Like your lungs were remembering they had room. After a while, the man said, "I once lost everything." You glanced at him. He wasn't looking for pity. War. He continued. Fire. Sickness. The whole tragic buffet. You nodded. Slowly. My wife. 2 sons. Our home. Even the sandals I was wearing. He chuckled. Though honestly, they were falling apart anyway. You stopped chewing. He didn't blink. I remember standing in the ash of my home, nothing in my hands but soot, and thinking this must be the bottom. He looked at you then, and it was, but not in the way I feared. The pond rippled as a dragonfly skimmed its surface. You swallowed the last of the rice, grateful you had no response. Some things don't need commentary. I walked for 3 days without direction. He continued. Didn't know where I was going. Didn't care. He leaned back on one elbow, eyes on the clouds. Then I passed an old woman by the roadside. She was boiling water in a tin can. Nothing else. No food. Just boiling water. I asked her why. You waited. She said, because the sound of it comforts me. He chuckled again, softer this time. And somehow that saved me. You tilted your head. How? Because I realized that peace wasn't in what I lost. It was in what I could still listen to. He reached over, tapped the side of your bowl. This, he said, it's an ear, not a mouth. You blinked. He grinned. That's why it's shaped like that. Your bowl is supposed to receive, not demand, not expect, just receive. You ran a finger around the rim of the bowl. It felt different now, like a question instead of a container. The old man lay back in the grass, arms behind his head. I stopped chasing new things that day, he said. I started noticing old things instead, like how the wind moves differently around grief, or how silence has its own taste. You whispered, what does it taste like? He smiled without opening his eyes, like warm rice after sorrow. The wind shifted. Somewhere nearby, a bell rang faintly, one of the chimes hanging from the eaves of the temple. The sound floated toward you, then faded like breath on glass. You closed your eyes. The air felt full, yet light. Grief sat beside you, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It had softened like rice left in a warm pot. The man sat up again. I still cry, he said, but I don't cling. You nodded. That's the thing no one tells you, he said. Letting go doesn't mean not feeling. It just means not grabbing with both hands. He stood slowly, brushed grass from his robes, and stretched with a satisfied groan. You gonna sit here all day? He asked. You looked around. The world was still. Maybe, you said. Good. He nodded. That means you're not running anymore. He took a step, then paused. You remember the question I asked about the salt and the lake? You nodded. Well, here's your next one. If your heart breaks, does that mean it's broken? You frowned. Is that a riddle? He winked. Everything's a riddle until you stop answering out loud. And with that, he vanished into the trees again. That evening, the master found you still sitting beneath the pine. He said nothing. He just sat down beside you. The two of you stared at the pond, at the dragonfly that had returned, at the clouds that had gone nowhere. Then the master whispered, he visits when you're ready. You didn't ask who. You already knew. That night, sleep came like a memory you'd forgotten you had. Soft, familiar, undemanding. You didn't try to explain anything. You didn't try to understand. You just let your breath pour into the bowl of your chest until it overflowed into dreams. Next time, the master will show you how worry is just steam rising and what happens when you take your mind off the stove. But for now, let silence wrap around you. Let grief find a pillow. Let the taste of warm rice remain. And rest. Loss has a flavor. You just don't notice it right away. At first, it's bitter, sharp, metallic, like biting your tongue during a difficult conversation. Then it goes flat, then numb. But if you sit with it long enough, really sit without trying to fix or rename it, you'll find something else underneath. Something earthy, warm. Something that tastes like survival. That morning, you return to the same spot by the pond, your empty bowl beside you and the wind still teasing the tips of the grass. No one told you to go there. Your feet simply brought you, like they had been listening to a song your mind couldn't hear. The old man appeared again, naturally, without fanfare. You were starting to suspect he lived in the trees or maybe inside some pocket of silence only monks could access. He dropped beside you with a grunt, holding a clay jar wrapped in twine. "Breakfast," he said. "If your stomach still remembers how to be grateful." You smirked. "You keep feeding me. Should I be concerned?" He handed you a small wooden spoon. "Just consider it karmic balance. I talk too much. You eat too little." You opened the jar and sniffed. It was unfamiliar, fermented, salty, a stew of something rooty and strong. "What is it?" you asked. "Survival food," he replied. "From when there's nothing else." You took a bite. It was rough, sour, intense, then strangely comforting. "Not bad," you said, in a desperate kind of way. He grinned. "Loss tastes better when shared." For a while, neither of you spoke. You just sat there, trading bites and breeze. Then he said quietly, "Did I tell you how I survived the first winter after the war?" You shook your head. He didn't look at you as he spoke. "I wandered through mountain villages. No family left. No job. Just the rags on my back and the ache in my chest. I'd knock on temple doors, but most were closed. Fear makes people cruel sometimes." You nodded. You'd seen it, even in the eyes of the generous. "Then one night, I found a monastery that had burned to the ground. Nothing left but a stone platform and some roof tiles." He leaned back, his gaze lifting to the sky. "I made a shelter from the ruins, slept under broken beams curled up beside charred wood. No food, just snow and quiet." You whispered, "That must have been awful." He shook his head slowly. "It was real. The first real night I'd had in months. No pretending, no surviving, just being." He looked at you now. "I sat there starving, watching my breath freeze in front of me. And I thought, well, this is it." You held your breath, but it wasn't. A woman came the next morning, wrinkled, half blind. She carried a pot of soup so thin it was basically hot water and roots. He smiled. She said nothing, just placed it beside me and left. You asked, "Did you ever see her again?" "No," he said. "But I still taste that soup, You both laughed softly. He added, "It wasn't the soup that saved me. It was the flavor of being remembered." You looked into your bowl, now half full with stew. The flavor lingered on your tongue, sharper than rice, more honest than salt. "Does loss ever go away?" you asked. He shook his head. "No, but it stops needing to be fixed. You just carry it better." You breathed in deeply. The air smelled like pine earth and something you couldn't name. "You know," he said, "people think emptiness is a curse. Isn't it?" He raised a brow, or at least tried to. "Emptiness is just space. For breath. For soup. For silence. For things to return to you when they're ready." You let that settle, like stew in your stomach, like peas in your bones. The master found you later that morning, bowl in hand, traces of stew still around the rim. He nodded once approvingly. Then he reached into his robe and pulled out a small folded cloth. "Open it," he said. You did. Inside was a single coin, old, worn, carved with a lotus. "Yours," he said. You stared at it. "I didn't earn this," you replied. He tilted his head. "What's more valuable?" he asked. "The coin, or what you've learned without it?" You didn't answer. Instead, you closed the cloth and held it gently, as if it might crumble from too much pressure. That night, you lay on your mat, the coin near your pillow, the stew still warming your core. You didn't feel rich, you didn't feel wise, you felt steady. And sometimes, that's more than enough. Next time, the master will talk about your mind as a boiling pot, and why your thoughts are just steam escaping a lid you forgot to remove. But for now, taste the silence. Let your breath simmer and sleep in the flavor of loss made tender. Worry is just steam. That's what the master said as he leaned over the cooking pot, lifting the lid with a practiced flick of the wrist. A cloud of fragrant vapor rolled upward, fogging his glasses, steaming his eyebrows into tiny question marks. You stood nearby, watching the contents bubble. Millet sweet potato ginger. Breakfast in progress. He turned to you, still holding the lid, and said, "Most people think they're boiling over, but really, they're just forgetting to take the lid off." You raised an eyebrow. "So, thoughts are heat." "No," he said. "Thoughts are the ingredients. Heat is life, and worry is what happens when you ignore both." The pot bubbled louder. You had no idea if this was metaphor or menu, but you listened. You'd been waking early, before the others, before the sun even admitted it was morning. Lately, your dreams had started to shift from frantic and abstract to simple and slow. In one, you just watched a leaf float down a river for what felt like hours. No urgency, no twist ending, just a leaf floating. And when you told the master about it, he said, "Good. Your mind is getting bored with its own drama," which was strangely comforting. Back in the kitchen, the master stirred the pot with long circular motions. "The trick," he said, is to let things move without your constant stirring. You watched the rhythm of his wrist. He added, "Your mind doesn't need your supervision all the time. It's not a toddler." You smiled. Then he pointed to your chest. "But that one," he said, "still thinks it's in charge." You looked down. "I feel better than I used to," you said. "I know," he replied. "That's why now is the dangerous part." "What do you mean?" "Because now you'll want to keep the feeling. Bottle it, own it, protect it." You nodded. He was right. You'll try to manage peace like a savings account. And the moment you do, you'll start worrying about losing it. Which means it's already gone. The pot began to hiss gently. Steam rose in little spirals, like lazy ghosts. The master stepped aside and motioned for you to take over. "Stir," he said. You did. The millet was thick now, soft. The kind of texture that says, "Let's not rush into chewing." He handed you a small spoon. "Taste." You obeyed. It was rich, quiet, just enough heat. He nodded. "Now imagine you added pepper, then more, then chili oil, then more ginger, and you kept stirring faster and faster." You grimaced. "It would burn." "Exactly," he said. And that's what most people do with their minds every morning. Later, you sat outside with your bowl of millet steam curling into the air like incense. The old man with no eyebrows joined you again. He didn't ask. He just sat down and started eating from your bowl without a word. "Good," he said. "This tastes like someone finally stopped fighting the spoon." You smiled. "That's because I didn't cook it." He laughed. "Even better. Non-effort always tastes better than striving." Then he looked at you seriously. "Tell me," he said, "what's the worst thing that could happen to you right now?" You paused. "Maybe losing everything." Again, he nodded. "And what's the most likely thing?" "Getting wet." Again. "And if both happened, loss and rain, would you still breathe?" You nodded. "Then why worry?" You both sat in silence. Birdsong layered itself over the trees. A rooster crowed from somewhere far, like it had just remembered its job. The warmth from the millet lingered in your belly. The old man tapped your bowl. "Next time your mind starts cooking up some nonsense," he said, "just lift the lid, let it out." You asked, "What if it doesn't stop?" He shrugged. "Let it steam. Just don't stick your face in it." You both laughed. That evening, the master called you to the garden. He was planting onions, not meditating, not teaching, not reciting koans, just digging dirt. He handed you a bulb. "Here," he said, "plant this." You hesitated. "No instructions." He smiled. "You already know what to do. Your body remembers more peace than your thoughts allow. You planted it. Simple, humble, done." Then he said something you'd remember for a long time. You don't have to understand peace to belong to it. That night, you slept with your window open. Let the breeze blow across your mat. Let the crickets sing whatever lullaby they knew. Let the steam of old thoughts rise up and disappear. You didn't hold on. You didn't chase clarity. You simply allowed and let it pass. Next time you'll meet a boiling pot, that does spill over, and a lesson in the fine art of stepping back from your own mind. But for now, set the spoon down, let the fire fade, and rest in the warmth that remains. There's a fire under the pot. You don't always see it. You don't always feel it. But it's there, quiet, persistent, licking the bottom of your thoughts like it has nowhere else to be. The master pointed to it one morning, not with his finger, but with his silence. You'd been talking a lot about your meditation, your dreams, your theories, even your digestion for some reason. And the master just listened until he put down his teacup and said, "Your mind is boiling again." You stopped mid-sentence, "But I feel calm." "You sound like soup," he replied. That afternoon he took you to the kitchen, not for cooking this time, just for watching. He placed a small iron pot over the fire, empty. You watched as the metal slowly darkened, then lightened again near the edges. He said nothing, just sat beside it, waiting. After a while, smoke began to rise, not from food, but from the metal itself. Dry, hollow, overheated. He looked at you. That's what your thoughts do when you leave the fire on and forget the water. You blinked. What's the water breath? Joy, space, anything that cools. You sat quietly. The pot groaned softly, expanding from the heat. And the fire, you asked. He smiled. Desire, worry, fear, the usual. You remembered a time before you came to the temple when your life felt like a stove left on high. Work, noise, traffic, screens, always boiling, always hissing. Sometimes you didn't even know what you were cooking anymore. You were just stirring because the spoon was in your hand. Now, things were different. But the fire hadn't disappeared. It had just moved deeper, quieter, more convincing. Later that day, you sat by the pond again, bowl in lap. The man with no eyebrows arrived, predictably unpredictable. He looked at you and said, "You're simmering." You raised an eyebrow, meaning he sat beside you, pulled out a fan, and began waving it lazily. "You're not boiling yet, but the heat is on. I can smell it." You sniffed your robes. "No, not your body." He laughed. "Your mind." You sighed. He leaned in. "You thinking again?" You nodded. "I was trying to solve something." He shook his head. "There it is." Then he told you a story. "Once I met a man who carried a teapot everywhere, not to drink from, just to have. He said it reminded him that everything important needed heat, but not too much." You waited. One day I asked him if he'd ever boiled over. He smiled. He said, "Of course, that's how I learned where to set the flame." You let out a breath. The wind passed over the pond like a hand smoothing sheets before bed. The old man pointed to your chest. "Right now, you're a pot. Not too hot, not too just aware. Then he flicked your forehead gently. Stay that way. You smiled. How simple, he said. Don't feed the fire. You raised an eyebrow. What feeds it? Clinging, pushing, performing, and worst of all, explaining. You both laughed. Then he stood up and stretched his arms. You're learning, he said. Your steam smells better than last week. And then, like always, he was gone. That night, the master sat beside you on the steps of the meditation hall. No words, just night air, crickets, distant wind chimes, one small owl with opinions. Then he whispered almost to himself, "When the fire gets too high, take your hands off the pot." You didn't reply. You didn't need to. Sleep that night felt different. It wasn't deep like a cave. It was wide, spacious, airy, like lying on a soft rooftop under stars that knew your name. You let your breath cool each thought as it rose. And for the first time, you didn't need to fix anything before resting. Next time you lose a thought and discover it was never yours to begin with. But for now, let your fire go low. Let the pot stay still and drift into the hush between bubbles. Sleep gently. Some thoughts slip away like socks in the laundry. You remember putting them in. You remember holding them. But when you look again, gone. And somehow, in their absence, you feel lighter, even if you can't explain why. It happened to you on the 12th morning. You woke with a word on your tongue, something important, a phrase, a teaching, a line from a dream. It pulsed softly at the edge of memory, then vanished. Just like that, gone. You lay there for a while trying to trace its shape like following footprints in fog. But the harder you chased it, the farther it floated. Finally, you gave up. You got up, stretched, bowed to the quiet room. And the first thought of your day was, what if I didn't need to find it again? The master was in the garden humming, tunelessly planting small shoots of lettuce like he was tucking them in for a nap. You approached slowly. He didn't look up. Lost something, he asked. You paused. I think so. He nodded. Then stopped looking. You blinked. Aren't I supposed to be mindful of what I lose? He wiped his hands on his robe. Not every leaf that falls needs to be gathered, he said. Then he pointed to your chest. You keep your thoughts like old receipts folded, faded, and long expired. You opened your mouth to reply. He held up a finger. Let it slip. So you tried. That afternoon, you sat by the edge of the bamboo grove bowl on your lap, eyes half closed, letting thoughts drift by like clouds at a lazy parade. Some were shaped like errands, some like cravings. One looked suspiciously like your high school gym teacher, but none stayed. Until one did. A thought, small, sticky. It whispered, "You're supposed to be more enlightened by now." You felt it settle into your chest, heavy, judging, familiar. Your fingers curled around the rim of your bowl. But then, something new. You didn't argue with the thought. You didn't analyze it. You just watched, and then it slipped. Like a drop of water sliding off the edge of a leaf. Gone. And with it, the tension in your jaw, your neck, your stomach. The man with no eyebrows appeared just as you exhaled. He sat beside you and said, "You dropped something." You smiled. "I know." He handed you a pebble. "What's this?" you asked. "Something to hold when you forget you're already free." You turned the pebble over in your hand. It was smooth warm from the sun. Utterly ordinary. "I keep losing thoughts," you said. He nodded. "Good. You're not a museum." You laughed softly. Then he looked at you serious this time. "Tell me," he said, "what's the difference between a thought and a bird?" You tilted your head. "Birds fly." "Exactly," he said. "But you don't try to catch every bird, do you?" You blinked. "So why try to keep every thought?" That evening, during Zazen, you sat longer than usual. Your knees ached. Your back sang old protest songs, but your mind was soft, not blank, just open. Thoughts came. Did I remember to sweep the hall? Gone. Should I have said thank you more clearly this morning? Gone. What was that word from the dream? Gone. Each one like mist rising. You didn't hold them, and they didn't hold you. Later, as you prepared for sleep, the master passed your room. He paused. Then, in a low voice, said, "You're starting to forget things that don't belong to you." You looked up. "Like what?" He smiled. "Like expectations." Then walked on. You lay down. The room quieted. No inner commentary, no emotional weather report, just a slow, deep sense of permission. Permission to forget. Permission to release. Permission to let thoughts pass through you like wind through reeds. Sleep came like a gentle thief, taking only what you never really needed. Next time you'll return to the temple empty-handed, and your teacher will welcome you like you've brought him the moon. But for now, let go of the word. Let go of the need to remember. Let sleep be the one thought that stays. You returned to the temple with nothing. No herbs, no coins, no new insight to flash like a badge of spiritual progress. Just dust on your sleeves, a small pebble in your pocket, and the quiet in your chest that had been growing steadily like moss on an old stone. When the master saw you from across the courtyard, he didn't ask where you'd been, didn't raise an eyebrow, didn't even pause his sweeping. He simply looked at you and said, "Ah, you finally brought me something worth keeping." You blinked. "But I have nothing." He smiled. "Exactly." That morning, you'd gone out again, not to fetch anything, not to search for meaning, but simply to walk. You followed the path through the pine grove, past the stone bridge that always felt slightly too narrow, into the valley where the air thickens and the wind forgets where it's going. Each step had felt lighter. Not because your body was rested, but because your mind had stopped packing bags before every journey. You no longer carried every question, every worry, every half-finished sentence. You walked like someone who trusted the road to finish its own thoughts. And for the first time, nothing was missing. Along the way, you passed a vendor selling steamed buns. He smiled at you with the kind of joy that comes from not needing customers. You bowed. He offered one. You reached for your pouch, then remembered. Empty. You opened your hands apologetic. He just laughed, pressed the warm bun into your palm and said, "Return it. When you forget, you owe me." You walked away grinning, bun in hand, the smell of it lingering in your robe like kindness, baked into fabric. Later you passed a woman hunched over a rice field. She looked up, squinting, and asked, "Are you one of those monks who tries to fix people with riddles?" You paused, then smiled. "Not today." She nodded. "Good. I prefer those who just listen." So you did. For an hour you stood beside her, not saying a word. Just watching her pull weeds, shake mud from her sleeves, hum a tune that may have been about nothing at all. When she turned to leave, she said, "You're easier to be near than most people who speak." That felt like something, though. You couldn't explain what. By the time you returned to the temple, the sun had dipped low, and the air carried that golden hush that only appears when the day knows it's done enough. You had nothing in your hands. No answers, no items. Not even a parable in your pocket. Just silence and breath and a strange fullness inside the emptiness. The master welcomed you with a bowl of tea. You both sat on the wooden steps. He passed you the cup. You sipped. It was bitter, slightly burnt, not perfect, but it was tea. And you were here. That seemed more than enough. He looked at you and said, "Did you find what I sent you for?" You shook your head. "I wasn't sent." He nodded. "Even better." Then he pulled something from his sleeve, a tiny paper crane folded clumsily. "You dropped this?" he said. You frowned. "I don't remember folding that." "You didn't," he replied, then placed it gently on your knee. That night, you placed the crane beside your mat, next to the pebble, next to the nothing you had returned with. And as you lay down, you realized, returning empty-handed doesn't mean returning with less. It means returning open, returning ready, returning like space around a flame, not the flame itself, but everything it needs in order to dance. Sleep wrapped around you, like a robe freshly dried in the sun. And before your thoughts could assemble, you let them fall apart again. Next time a feather floats through the temple courtyard and teaches you more than 1,000 scrolls. But for now, hold nothing, be everything, and rest in the joy of coming back with empty hands. It floated down from nowhere, a single feather, white, curled slightly at the edge, as if it had heard too many secrets. You were sweeping the temple steps, broom in hand, mind adrift in the slow rhythm of bristles on wood, when the feather appeared spinning through the sunlight, like it had no particular destination and no interest in landing. And when it did, softly, silently, right in front of your feet, you paused. There it was. No sound, no purpose. Just a feather. The wind moved moved on without it. The master appeared beside you as he often did, without footsteps, without warning. He stared at the feather with you, then said almost reverently, "Don't move it." You blinked. "Why?" "Because it's teaching," he said. You looked down. It wasn't glowing, it didn't hum, it didn't unfold a secret scroll from its spine. It just lay there, still. You left the feather on the steps. All day. No one touched it, not even the wind. It sat through the heat of the afternoon, the soft hush of evening, the candlelit hour when the temple hall filled with silence and sleepy breath. And you sat with it, watching, breathing, and slowly, without effort, something inside you began to match its stillness. That night, after evening tea, the man with no eyebrows joined you on the steps. He looked at the feather, nodded once, then said, "I once met a monk who kept a feather on his altar instead of a statue." You raised an eyebrow. He said the Buddha was too heavy. You laughed, then paused. Was he joking? The old man smiled. "That's the best part. I never found out." You looked at the feather. It had shifted slightly, just a tilt, as if bowing to the moonlight. "I've been sitting here for hours," you said, "and I still don't know what it means." The old man stretched his legs. "Maybe it means that not everything has to mean something." The master joined you then, holding a small bowl of warm water. He knelt down, dipped his fingers in, and gently splashed a bit of water beside the feather. You watched in silence. The water pooled, and the feather slowly lifted, spun once, and floated again just an inch. Just long enough to remind you of softness. Then it landed again in nearly the same place. You asked, "Why the water?" he said, "to see if it still trusted the wind." Later that night, as you laid on your mat, the feather returned to your thoughts, not as a puzzle, not as a metaphor, just as presence, just that. You thought maybe peace is like that, something you don't grab, something you don't define, something you just witness and let land when it's ready. Sleep came slowly, not because you were restless, but because you were already close. Close to the edge of dreams, close to the kind of stillness that doesn't announce itself, close to the part of yourself that never needed fixing. The feather drifted somewhere in your breath, light, unbothered, and you followed it. Next time the master tells a story of how he once lost everything in a single afternoon, and why that was the happiest day of his life. But for now, feel the air above your chest. Notice how it doesn't press. It only supports. Be like the feather and drift. The master once lost everything. Not gradually, not metaphorically, but all at once in a single ordinary afternoon that didn't seem to mind that it was about to change his life. He told you this while peeling an apple with a dull knife. The peel came off in one long curl like a ribbon that remembered how to dance. You were sitting beside him, trying to balance between listening and not interrupting. He said, "I lost my robe, my coins, my documents, and the last letter my mother ever wrote to me." You looked at him. No sadness, no strain, just a matter-of-fact smile. He bit into the apple, loudly. "Someone stole my pack while I was bathing in a stream. I came out of the water and stood there, dripping, holding a sandal and half a prayer. You asked. And then I laughed," he said, and sneezed. That image stayed with you. A young monk barefoot, wet, freshly robbed, sneezing on the side of a trail with nothing but sky above him. Somehow you couldn't picture it as a tragedy. It sounded free. That afternoon, the master invited you to walk with him. No instruction, no destination. You passed through bamboo groves and over a ridge lined with wind-worn stones. Every few steps he tossed something from his sleeve, a seed pod, a torn bit of paper, a pebble. You asked, "Why are you dropping those?" he said. "Because I used to carry them for reasons I've forgotten." You nodded. You understood more than you expected to. He stopped at a clearing where the wind spoke in long, slow syllables. "This is where I sat after being robbed," he said. "I stayed for 2 nights. You looked around. There was nothing special here, no shrine, no marker, just grass, wind, a few stubborn flowers. I thought I was ruined," he said, "but I was just returned." You sat beside him. The silence between you felt generous. Then he asked, "What would you lose right now if you could?" You didn't answer immediately, not because you didn't know, but because you did. Eventually, you whispered, "The need to be seen." He nodded as if you'd named an old ghost he'd shared tea with. "That's a good one," he said. "Heavy, invisible, very popular." You both laughed. Then he added, "When I lost everything I discovered, I was still here. And if I was still here, then I hadn't really lost the part that mattered." You stayed there until the sun angled low and painted your shadows like long, sleepy memories. Then he stood, dusted his robes and said, "Let's go back. We've done enough nothing for today." Back at the temple, you passed your room and paused at the small shelf where you kept a few folded things. A letter, a coin, a smooth stone, the feather. You looked at each one. Then without ceremony, you opened the window. Let the wind take what it wanted. It didn't take much. Just a torn scrap of paper and the stale sense of obligation you hadn't noticed was clinging to it. You felt lighter and emptier and somehow more whole. That night before sleep, you whispered to no one in particular, "I didn't lose it. It left." And your breath responded with a gentle, silent yes. Next time a visitor arrives with heavy bags and a restless spirit, and you'll watch how even gold can weigh more than grief. But for now, let go. Let it leave. Let it take the noise with it and sleep in the gentle echo of nothing left to carry. He arrived just before dusk, dressed in clean robes that didn't know how to wrinkle, with shoes too polished for a mountain trail and a bag that clinked every time he moved. You noticed him from the meditation hall window. He stood near the temple gate, shifting his weight from one foot to the other like someone used to pacing in lobbies and boardrooms. Not stone courtyards and bird songs. The master, of course, opened the door himself. No formality, no robe. Just a towel over one shoulder and the scent of firewood in his sleeves. The visitor bowed. Too low, too long. And when he stood upright, he smiled, that sharp, business-flavored smile. "Revered teacher," he said, "I've come seeking peace." The master looked at the man's leather bag, then at his shoes, then said, "You'll have to leave that outside." The visitor blinked. "The shoes?" "No," the master said. "The bag." You watched from a distance as the man hesitated, then reluctantly placed the bag down carefully, as if it might explode or sue him. Later you saw him sitting on the porch sipping tea that didn't quite fit his posture. He looked around like a guest at a party he wasn't sure he belonged to. You approached and bowed. He nodded. "I was told this temple offers answers," he said. You smiled gently, only the kind that sound like questions. He chuckled politely, then asked, "Why does it feel heavier to sleep now that I'm rich?" That evening the master served dinner himself. Plain rice, steamed greens, pickled radish. The visitor picked at it like it might contain a secret message printed in soy sauce. After the meal, he asked, "Do you ever feel anxious?" The master paused. "Of course, but you're calm." The master nodded. Calm doesn't mean empty. It means not overflowing. The man looked confused. "I don't follow." The master pointed to the teapot. "When it boils, do you remove the flame or blame the pot?" That night, the visitor lay in the guest room on a soft mat, under a quiet roof. But sleep wouldn't come. You heard him shifting, sighing, unzipping, rezipping, like a suitcase trying to hold too much thought. In the morning, he looked pale, eyes tired, hands restless. You asked if he wanted to walk the garden path. He agreed. You walked together under cedar trees. The sky hung low and soft like wool, just before rain. Finally, he said, "I built a life to feel safe, to feel in control. But now I can't stop managing everything, even when I'm trying to sleep." You nodded. "I know that feeling. Like your thoughts are employees who won't clock out." He laughed, then frowned. "I used to think money would give me space, but now I just fill that space with more to manage." You stopped beside a bench, pointed to a stone. "This rock," you said, "has been here longer than any of us. It does nothing, and it still belongs." He sat beside it. For a long while, neither of you spoke. Then he whispered, "I left the bag outside, but I brought the weight with me anyway." You smiled. Most people do. Later, the master handed him a small empty envelope. "What's this?" the visitor asked. "A receipt," the master said. "For what?" "For everything you didn't carry in." The visitor stared at the envelope. Then he laughed. Really laughed. The kind of laugh that empties your lungs and rearranges your shoulders. Before he left, he bowed again, this time shorter, softer. "I didn't find peace here," he said. The master nodded. "That's because peace didn't leave you. You just hadn't unpacked enough space to feel it." That night, the wind was gentle. The guest room was empty again. And sleep came quickly because your own thoughts had stopped auditioning for importance. You dreamt of a bag slowly turning to mist, its contents floating upward like feathers. No names, no numbers. Just silence. With a zipper. Next time the master will teach you why an empty bowl makes for a full night's sleep and why your dreams are clearest when you stop trying to dream at all. But for now, let your breath unpack. Let your mind set down its bags and sleep like someone who finally knows the door was never locked. The bowl was empty on purpose. You placed it beside your mat every night now, not for food, not for offerings, just to remind yourself. A small round silence. One evening, just before the last bell, the master sat beside you as you folded your robe. He didn't speak, not at first. Then, without looking up, he said, "Why do you think monks carry bowls?" You answered, "To receive food." He shook his head gently. "Not just food. Emptiness." You paused. "That's what makes it useful," he continued. "Its emptiness is its gift." He picked up your bowl, turned it slowly in his hands. You carry it, protect it, clean it, not because of what's in it, but because of what it makes room for. He placed it back down beside your mat. And that, he said, is exactly how you must treat your mind before sleep. You remembered nights before the temple nights where sleep was a negotiation, where your mind was a shopping cart, left rolling in the parking lot, where your thoughts screamed like late-night infomercials promising happiness in 3 payments. But now things were quieter, not empty of thought, but open. The master told you a story that night about a young monk who couldn't sleep because he feared losing his progress. Every night, he'd review his behavior, count his breath, track his stillness like a spiritual accountant. And every morning, he'd wake up disappointed until one night, exhausted and bitter, he forgot to try and slept like a stone. You don't sleep when your bowl is full, the master said. You sleep when you stop adding. He looked at you as if peering through a window behind your eyes. Stop seasoning your rest with self-improvement. You chuckled. You're not soup. Later, as the lanterns dimmed and the others retired to their rooms, you sat alone with your bowl, the moonlight pooling inside it like milk. You stared into that soft curve of nothingness. And for once, you didn't search for a lesson. You didn't translate it into metaphor. You just let it be what it was. An empty bowl, perfect in its quiet. The man with no eyebrows appeared, then silent as ever. He looked at the bowl, then at you, then said, "So, you finally stopped trying to fill it with meaning." You nodded. He smiled. know it can hold sleep. That night you laid down slowly like a leaf settling on water. Your breath moved in and out of your chest with the same rhythm it had in the womb before worry ever taught it to hurry. You didn't think about tomorrow. You didn't chase forgiveness or clarity. You didn't rehearse softness. You simply were. And sleep came like a kind guest, not dramatic, not heroic. Just someone who let themselves in through the unlocked door, sat beside your bowl, and rested with you. Next time we return to the young monk laughing under the stars, stomach empty, heart full, and finally understanding what the master meant from the beginning. Sometimes to find yourself, you have to lose the last thing you're holding. But for now, set your bowl beside you. Let it shine empty and fall gently into the space it holds. No money, no problem. The young monk laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a breathy chuckle of restraint. A real belly-warmed loud laugh that startled a crow off the temple roof. It happened just after sunset. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't bathed. He was sitting barefoot on the stone steps, stomach rumbling, robe damp from an afternoon rain. And he laughed. Because suddenly, it was all very funny. He'd lost the money. He'd returned empty-handed. He'd worried, failed, doubted, misunderstood. And still here he was, alive, breathing, smiling like someone who had been let in on a joke older than language. The master emerged from the shadows carrying 2 bowls of rice. He sat beside the monk and handed one over. "You finally get it," he said. The monk, between bites, said, "Get what?" The master looked at him. "That you never needed to earn rest." They sat in silence. Rice, night air, steam curling upward like memory. Then the master added, "People think peace is expensive." He tapped his chest. "But it's always been free. It just costs everything you're holding too tightly." That morning, the monk had walked the village path again, his bowl empty, his mind quieter. No strategy, no script. He bowed to a farmer expecting nothing. The farmer nodded, then gave him a smile and a small plum. He ate it slowly. It was tart, real, alive in his mouth like something that remembered sunlight. And somehow it was enough. Later, a child passed him on the road and pointed wide-eyed. "Mom, that man has nothing." The mother hushed the child, embarrassed. But the monk turned, smiled, and said, "She's right." He bowed. "Isn't it wonderful?" That night he returned to the temple and found the master sitting by the garden watching a snail climb a bamboo stalk like it had all the time in the world. The master looked up. "Well?" The monk held up his empty hands. "No gold," he said. "No food, no answers." The master nodded. "But you slept?" The monk smiled. "Like a baby." The next morning you woke slowly. Your body felt weightless, not light like a bird, light like forgiveness. You stretched, then sat up with a soft smile. You didn't reach for your thoughts. You didn't worry about remembering the dream. You just breathed, like someone who no longer needed to be fixed. The master passed your doorway and paused. "You have everything you need now," he said. You looked up. "I don't have anything." He nodded. "Exactly. And that was it. No reward, no graduation, no scroll of enlightenment handed down from a golden cloud. Just morning light and breath and the gentle sound of wind brushing across paper walls. Now as you lie down, tonight, let your own hands fall open. Let your chest rise and fall like a bowl carried by breath. Let go of everything you thought you needed just for now. No gold, no grasping, no script. Just you, here, still. Next time we'll begin a new journey. Mental relaxation, a strange dish that helped a Zen master survive. Winter, a warm, quiet story about cold nights. Strange soup and the kindness that comes from unexpected places. But for now, let your breath be the only thing you carry. Let the world slip from your fingers like water that was never meant to be held, and drift into sleep like a monk under stars, with no money and no problem. End of script. Sweet dreams.